Okay, I think we're ready to go. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another one of NGen's project podcasts. Today, and as we approach National Truth and Reconciliation Day, we're not going to focus on a project. We're going to focus on one of our flagship economic or ecosystem development initiatives. And I couldn't be more delighted to have the Right Honourable Paul Martin, former Prime Minister of Canada and founder of the Martin Family Initiative, with us, together with Carlana Lindeman, who is the Education Director at the Martin Family Initiative. Thank you, Paul, Carlana, for joining. And first question, tell us a little bit about MFI. What does the Martin Family Initiative do?
Well, thank you, Jay. Carlana has told me that I'm going to lead off. We are not a democracy. But I can say on both of our behalfs that Carlana and I are very pleased to be here with you. As it just exactly as you have said, as we prepare for the very important recognition on September 30th of the National Truth and Reconciliation Day. Now, you asked about the mandate of MFI, the Martin Family Initiative. So let me just say that our mandate is to focus on what has to be done in terms of Indigenous youth education as they prepare for their future, and in doing so, determine the future of our country. So let me explain the background behind that. Canada's economic success in the world has been evident for many reasons, not the least of which has been the development of our natural resources from coast to coast to coast. There is, however, one huge gap in our developmental programs. We talk about our natural resources, but our greatest natural resource is our young people. And our education systems, unfortunately, have left many of them behind. The youngest and fastest growing segment of our population are the Indigenous peoples of this land. And in generation after generation, they have not been given the tools they need to succeed, the tools that only education can provide. In Canada, we have really got to face up to this. If Canada is going to compete in the very, very new world that lies out there, and that every business person watching this is talking about, whether that's the digital economy or whatever it is, it's a new world that's out there. We can no longer in this world turn our backs on the need to give every single young person in our country who seeks it the education that will enable them to show the kind of economic leadership and innovation that will be required of any nation that is to succeed. It's for this reason that 15 years ago, we started MFI and our Indigenous high school business course, which, despite the chaos of COVID, is now taught in some 40 schools across the country. It's also for this reason that a couple of years ago, we approached NGen to help us prepare the way for business education at a younger stage. And we did this because doing so at the elementary school can provide many students with a much better foundation from which to build their subsequent economic learning. I'd also note that because of NGen, we will be able to open our students' eyes to the opportunities provided by the manufacturing industry. Now, quite simply, manufacturing is a cornerstone of the modern economy, represents more than 10% of Canada's total GDP. And I really want to thank NGen, who's doing an awful lot, but for opening this and many other doors to young Canadians. In summary, we live in a world that is in motion, and anybody who is operating in this world economically knows that it is a world that's going through tremendous change. And we owe it to our young, and we owe it to ourselves to prepare them with the tools they need to meet the challenges that lie ahead. And them must include every single Indigenous student who wants that study. And the reason for the young course is that the best way that they will do it later on is if in fact you offer it to them at the youngest age. Mm-hmm. And so I really, and I know I'm speaking for Carlana, I really want to thank you, Jay. I want to thank NGen for the partnership. And I'm going to now turn it over to you. We want to take on the world and win. We're only going to do it if every student, Indigenous, non-Indigenous in the country, participates.
Oh, thanks, Paul. I couldn't agree more, of course. And, you know, in manufacturing, and this isn't the only sector of the economy that's facing these issues, we have 25% of the workforce, a quarter of the workforce, who will retire by 2030. And the new entrants into the workforce, people in the youngest cohort up to 30 years of age, represent about 6% of the workforce. So the sector is facing some really severe labor shortages. But if companies are going to just remain even, keep output where they are, you know, keep that economic contribution going, they're going to have to increase productivity by about 25% by 2030. So there's going to be an awful lot of innovation, automation that is going to have to go into manufacturing. And frankly, we saw the opportunity to do exactly as you say, that, you know, Indigenous students represent a very large proportion of our school age population. And we need to give them the opportunity to participate productively and fully in this, you know, in the new economy, and to provide future careers that are meaningful. But that doesn't necessarily, I mean, a lot of that, of course, depends on being able to develop an education program that is meaningful for every student. And it's, you know, I think you're totally right that our education systems are not supporting the students, and Indigenous students in particular, and giving them that opportunity. So just to say, this initiative is so important for us, and we're a small shop. We have some very, very committed people, and I can tell you that how important it is for everybody in our organization to be able to say that they're supporting MFI, and when we hear the stories back from Carlana about the impact that we're having, it's just amazing there. But maybe Carlana, let me ask you here. Tell us a little bit about our initiative. Here, I'm going to let you say it in your words, because I've got my marching orders too.
Okay. Yeah. Oh, thank you both. Thank you both. So just to echo what Mr. Martin said, the support of NGen has been invaluable to us. If it hadn't been for NGen and you and you know, Bridget and Christy, the people that you work with, we wouldn't be able to have the impact that we're having, particularly as we really want to focus on the manufacturing sector and how to support that going forward. So what we developed together are two broad types of programs. The first one came at a request of First Nation leaders. And as you may know, most First Nation communities across the country do have an elementary school. There are very few high schools on reserve, but most have an elementary school. And the chiefs that I spoke with said, you know, we really want to have programs within our elementary schools on reserve that teach students, that open their eyes to the potential that they have in the future. So we zeroed in on two different projects for this cohort of schools. So the first was Introduction to Entrepreneurship, where again, we have a focus on product development and process and the basics of that. And the other is, that's about a 60-hour course. And the other is a 60-hour course on Introduction to Financial Literacy, because we know how important it is for students to learn at a very young age what it means to have money, to manage money. And much to our happiness and surprise, we're now having interest from non-First Nation schools in both of these courses, again, for Indigenous students. So we see a real ripple effect across the country. The other opportunity that NGen provided to us was to really enhance what we're doing with our high school entrepreneurship program. And to date, we've had about 6,800 students take that program since MFI launched. And with the support of NGen, we've developed a supplement, we call it. So for really exposing students to advanced manufacturing, what does that mean? What is the potential for them as workers, as leaders, as developers? So we're, again, it's really enabled us to go in a direction that we really wanted to, but with the professional and personal support from NGen, that's made a real difference for us.
Well, that's super. And I know that these courses are being delivered in, pretty remote communities often.
Mm-hmm.
Here,
Mm-hmm.
What are some of the challenges that students have, and in fact educators have in delivering that type of programming?
So we do have programs in small isolated communities, flying communities, but as well we're in large urban centers like Toronto and Winnipeg. And as Stats Canada showed us last year, we still have a high Indigenous population in 10 major cities across the country. If you had asked me this question 3 years ago, my answer would have been very different. But with the impact of COVID and the pandemic on schools, it made a real difference. And the digital divide, we hear that term, but it was very, very evident in terms of the number of students who weren't able to learn at home. They didn't have the connectivity. If they did, there may have been one computer to share among multiple siblings. So it became a real challenge for the schools that we work with to be able to offer our program. And one of the benefits and strong points of our program, the high school program in particular, is that there's a textbook workbook that all students have that they do their work in and they can keep it. So we did put all our material online, but we found the students still wanted their books. So in some cases, teachers went door to door and left the books on doorsteps so that students could retain the learning. And in some cases, in one school in particular in Northwestern Ontario, the teacher told us that kids rode their bike to the school parking lot because then they could get connectivity during COVID. So it was quite an eye opener in terms of what's happening. But across Canada, we work with a very dedicated group of teachers, supportive principals, mentors, guest speakers. So it's really a wraparound program that's making a difference, we believe, and the students tell us that. So we're quite comfortable with saying that.
Oh, that's great. The a part of the program, as you say, is financial literacy at a younger level, and then manufacturing entrepreneurship, and later on, and of course those two are matched together. Tell us a little bit about some of the impact that's had, and some of the feedback you've had from students.
It's quite interesting. We piloted the elementary program, the Introduction to Entrepreneurship, Introduction to Financial Literacy, in 4 on-reserve schools in the West, 1 in Alberta, 3 in Northern Saskatchewan. The teachers gave us feedback on a very regular basis, as did the students and the principals. And number one, they found it interesting, which at that age group is the highest compliment you can get for students in grades 6, 7, 8. The other is that the students found that they were learning a lot. So for instance, in financial literacy, they really learned a lot about actual currency. For most of them, they haven't worked with money. They charge things at the community store, or they use credit. So the ability to work with change and coins and so forth, the ability to learn about needs and wants, the function of financial institutions, whether it be a bank or a credit union, were all really, really important to the students. In terms of the entrepreneurship course, we had the students do market surveys to take a look at what services and operations are available in their communities. And then as a product development, they created a pizza shop, and they had to create a signature pizza. They had to then learn about pricing and marketing and all those kinds of things, and then naturally develop the product, which was very exciting. The teachers told us that they had really good attendance, which during COVID has been a real problem. And students spontaneously said, this is the most fun course that I've ever taken. So again, high compliments. But it's we asked them for feedback in terms of the drafts. Very little feedback really that changed a lot of what we did. We revised those, and those will be ready to go starting next month across the country.
Oh, that's super. When we talk to young people, we have another initiative called Careers of the Future that we want to link with this initiative. But it's really to attract young people into thinking positively about careers in advanced manufacturing. And we thought, first of all, well, maybe young people would be attracted by technology, and that's kind of an expectation today. It's not a real differentiator, but what really does make a difference is when you talk about what manufacturing does to make stuff that really makes a difference. And I think the young generation today really does want to make a difference, and it's part of the why we were so pleased to be supporting MFI, because we want the same type of opportunity for Indigenous youth too. But the feedback of our program, as you said, sounds so positive. But you must get that type of feedback right across all of the initiatives that MFI runs. I was going to ask you, Paul, what are some of the stories that you've heard from over the last several years that you've been supporting students?
So there are all kinds of issues out there. There are the digital economy. There are all kinds of issues. How do you sell to Europe versus how do you sell to South America? What are you doing and everything else? And there's a tendency, I think, for people to sort of say, well, the kids aren't going to be interested in that, or my God, these kids have lived for a long time in a very set off community, and they haven't seen all this, and they're not going to be interested. But the fact of the matter is, what I have found is that if somebody speaks to the students before you get there and just basically talks to them a little bit, it is amazing. You go in and you then sit down with these students, and they start coming at you with questions that are far more knowledgeable, far more sophisticated, not necessarily asked in a sophisticated way, but certainly, if you understand what they're driving at, they really do. They do understand. But the problem that they face is that nobody takes them seriously. But when you take them seriously and you then start to talk about the world that's out there, then you suddenly really hit what is the fundamental issue. Is if you're going to school, and this can be elementary school as well as high school, you are at some point bound to think about, what the heck am I going to do? Where am I going? What's it all about? And they start to ask themselves those questions. And then if you probably go back to your own childhood, you start to think, well, my God, I wasn't that dumb. I was pretty good. And these kids are exactly the same. They think, what am I going to do? How am I going to get there? And how is it possible for me to get way over there when I live way over here? And as soon as you start to open those subjects, you find out that they've been asking themselves those questions for a long time. And the mistake that is being made is not made by the students. It's made by us, by not really responding to the curiosity and the questions that they ask themselves and what's open for them. The big question is, what am I going to do in my life? That's their question.
Right. You were mentioning the importance of having someone speak to the students, and I think that's another area that we've been really very pleased to be able to support. I think we've had some very there are a number of Indigenous manufacturing companies in northern Canada, Western Canada, and Saskatchewan. I know that our team has been pretty active in putting together an Indigenous manufacturing and contracting cluster across Western Canada, and to be able to call on some of these people in manufacturing to speak knowledgeably about the opportunities that they saw, some of the challenges that they encountered, I think, as at least the feedback we've had from these mentors has been exceptional. But Carlana, I know that this isn't something that is been cooked up out of the blue. You work with advisory groups with First Nations communities, Indigenous communities, and leadership as well, and and as well as in this case, manufacturing, or people from manufacturing who can speak. Tell us a little bit about that outreach and how important that is.
For our high school program in particular, it's essential. When we identify a new community or a new school that wants to take the program on, we make it really clear that this is not a school-centric program. The school cannot offer this program on its own. We want the students to be out there in workplaces, in manufacturing institutions where health and safety allows it. We want them to visit a bank. We want them to hear the stories of people, of why they're in that particular profession, why they took on that trade, what gave them the idea to go ahead with their unique idea. So for us, having mentors, having guest speakers, having hosts for the students to go out and visit is extremely important. And the more Indigenous role models these students have, the better. It's really very inspirational for them, and they give us that feedback constantly. And we find that mentors get so enthused with the program that they offer to do virtual mentoring as well as in person. And that has been, thank goodness, because over the last 2 years, that was the only type of mentoring that was available. So that continued throughout COVID, that mentors joined classes and were able to give students support, and not just as a class, but they also are able to zero in on a particular business plan idea that a student may have and give them some advice and maybe help them push them in a little different direction. And again, that's all very appreciated by the students as well as the teachers and the school as a whole.
Mm-hmm. Can I just make a comment here? I think that there is a view by many, and I think a view some governments, that if these are kids in remote communities, they're not going to have the same degree of curiosity, and they're not going to be. There's a view that, oh my God, they're not going to be there. But that's not true. What I have found was absolutely amazing is that you can go in, meet with a bunch of students from downtown Toronto, and they are going to be immensely interested. You can go to schools in my hometown of Windsor, where they know what industrialization is. But then if you go to a community in the far north, as an example, and you sit down with those students and you just give them the slightest hint, okay, I'm prepared to open this conversation up, they come at you with the same kinds of questions, the same kinds of interests. They would help. It would be helpful if somebody was sort of helping them along the line. But I can tell you, I have never been in a community where I would walk away and say, these kids are never going to get it. Those kids get it. And all they have to do is to talk to somebody who will respond to them.
Right. It's, I think, amazing some of the assumptions that many people make about the potential of our Indigenous young people there. And it's, I mean, one of the real opportunities I think that we have in terms of providing that pathway to a career that is up to the students to pursue there, rather than sort of obstacles that are put in the way simply because people don't know.
Yeah,
there that what's next for our program, and what's next for MFI then?
Is that a Mr. Martin or that's a me?
Well, let's start with you, and then I'll ask Paul.
I'm asking you the question too.
Yeah.
We are looking, we see this as the first peel at it, if you like, but we know that there's differences, First Nation, Métis, Inuit differences across this country, geographical differences across this country. So we're really looking to see how can we personalize our program to make it fit for that particular location. We really want to delve a little bit further into pre-employment type of activities and really expose students, but also expose teachers. Because as a teacher, I still admit I do not know a lot about the manufacturing sector. So how can we better teach teachers about what is the current state of manufacturing, the data that you talked about, Jay, so that they too can ensure that they're encouraging students, making sure they're taking the right prerequisites to go on and take the post-secondary education that they need. So there, I think it's endless, the opportunities that we would have to work together.
And Carlana, remind me again. So at the end of our of this part of our project, how many schools are you targeting to introduce these courses into?
Well, the high school program would go into all of our programs, and we're gearing back up after COVID. So our goal is to be in hopefully 50 high schools this year by the end of the year. We also have one for our adult program. So we've developed a manufacturing supplement for our adult program, which again will be across Canada. Our goal for the elementary program was to be in 20 schools a year and keep adding. All of the pilot schools want to continue, which we thought was a high compliment. And we've already got interest from across the country, again, both provincial schools and schools on reserve to offer the program. So we see it as moving forward. It's pretty unique, the curriculum that's been developed for grades 6, 7, 8. There isn't anything else out there like it. So a lot of interest. And we're quite so proud of what happened. And with the advice from the people that sat on our advisory committee, it was invaluable in terms of how we moved it along.
Well, I know that we've spoken to a number of ministries of education at the provincial level across Canada, and everybody's very interested about in the program what the outcomes will be. And as you say, the number of times that I've heard, could we apply this in other schools that are where it's not just an Indigenous program, but more generally, which I think is fantastic.
I agree. Yeah, a lot of interest.
So one last question. National Truth and Reconciliation Day is on September 30th. Here, I think it's important for all Canadians to recognize the importance not only of the day, but in terms of reflection around that day. Carlana, Paul, I'll ask you, what's important for you on September 30th?
Well, I'll let the boss lady answer at the end. But I will make one comment on that, and that is that unfortunately we can't just dismiss economic difference between people, and what it really is, it's crucial that all of these young people have the same opportunity economically as other people. That this cannot be, this is not 14th century England. You're not born to.
Oops.
For you to be able to say we have the opportunity to go all the way, and I think that's what this is really all about. I run into this right across the country. Those kids go out, they sit down as you did and as I did, and sort of say, what the heck am I going to do? And they can't then say, oh, I can't do that. It's got to be, I want to do this. And if I want to be a nuclear physicist, or I want to be a teacher, if I want to be a hockey player, or if I want to, if I want to own a store, that has to be open to them. And they have got to be challenged to say, when you're thinking about what you want to do, don't put blockages in your way. And we're there to help you get over it. I really think that is the message that's got to get out. And I can tell you, I've never been anywhere in this country. I mean, I've been in the far north, and I've been, in Toronto, my hometown of Windsor. But it's the same thing with these kids. They all want to figure out, where am I going? And the only way that's going to work is if they decide, where am I going, they recognize that the means to get there are there.
That's great. Carlana.
I think the realization that most of us did not learn anything about Indigenous people in school. So what personally do you have to learn, and how will you do that? So there's, different kinds of reading that you can do, television shows, APTN runs a series, sometimes libraries have presentations, universities have presentations. So I think take every opportunity to learn. As organizations, I think there's a real onus on organizations to ensure that they are aware of Indigenous opportunities. So whether it's through procurement, through hiring, but also that whole area of awareness of staff. So how do you promote that within the organization? So I think there's multiple ways, of both personal and institutional ways of looking at that important day, and remembering that one day a year is not enough. I mean, this is a 364-day event, not just a one-day event.
Oh, that's super. Well, I can tell you the program that we've developed together is so important to us. I don't think that there really is any bigger bigger goal that we could aim at than providing young people with an opportunity to take full advantage of their future, and particularly Indigenous youth. So I want to thank you both. It was a partnership that came together through a number of conversations, and I'm just delighted that it has, and we really look forward to working with you in the future, and building our partnership into I think into an initiative that will attract not only attention across the country, but hopefully international attention as well. So thank you very much for your partnership, and thank you very much for participating in today's podcast.
Thank you for everything.
Thank you. And all your colleagues, Jay.
Yeah, it's been a team effort, and everybody has enjoyed it so much.
That's right. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.
Okay, bye-bye.